in one season, by one player, not a junior, not a qualifier grinding through empty side courts, the second best tennis player on the planet. 440 double faults. For context, that is more than 100 more than any other woman on tour managed that year. It works out to something like 14 or 15 a match across long stretches of the season. 14 double faults is roughly 4 free games. 4 games handed over before a single rally is even played. And in the worst week of it, in the opening days of that season, she lost 2 matches back-to-back with 18 double faults in one and 21 in the next, 39 in 2 matches. She cried on court. She started rolling serves in underhand, not as a tactic, not as a cheeky surprise, but because the real serve, the one that used to arrive at nearly 200 kilometers an hour, would not go into a box the size of a parking space. At one point that season, an umpire asked her if she was injured, because nothing you could see explained what was happening. She was ranked number 2 in the world. She could not start a point. 1 year later, she was a Grand Slam champion. 3 years later, she was the year-end world number 1 with the most lucrative single season any woman has ever had in this sport. $15 million and $8,000 in prize money. An all-time record. Same arm, same serve, same woman. So this is the question this video answers. How do you lose the one shot in sport that nobody can interfere with? No opponent, no defender, no wind, no excuse. Lose it in public, on television, with commentators counting your failures out loud in real time, and then rebuild it in the middle of a season, in front of the exact audience that watched it break. And the harder question underneath it, what did it cost her? Stick around. Because the answer runs through a hockey country that barely plays tennis, a father who left her one number, a biomechanist who tore her serve down to the bolts, and a tiger tattooed on her left forearm. Aryna Sabalenka was born on the 5th of May, 1998, in Minsk, Belarus. Understand what that means for a tennis player. Belarus is a hockey country, cold, small, around 9 million people, and the national obsession is played on ice. Tennis there is expensive, individual, and thin on the ground. Belarus has produced exactly 2 women who have won Grand Slam singles titles, and Sabalenka is the second, after Victoria Azarenka. Her father, Sergei Sabalenka, was a hockey player. His own career ended young, after a car accident. And the origin story, the one she has told so often that journalists stopped asking her to repeat it, is that when she was around 6 years old, she was in the back of his car in Minsk when he drove past a set of tennis courts. He looked at them, thought about it, and within weeks she was enrolled at a local club. There was no master plan. Nobody engineered her from age 3. She is, quite literally, the result of a man noticing something out of a car window, and he gave her one number. By her own account, repeated in interviews for years, Sergei told her the target was 2 Grand Slam titles. 2, before the age of 25. Not 1, not 10. 2. Remember that number. It comes back, and when it does, it lands hard. What she had immediately was force. If you have never watched her play, the sound is the whole story. Sabalenka does not construct points. She detonates them. She is a shade under 6 feet tall. She hits a forehand that commentators have spent a decade describing with vocabulary normally reserved for car crashes, and her serve, when it works, is one of the biggest weapons the women's game has ever had. And on her left forearm, in every match she plays and every trophy photo she takes, there is a tiger, her nickname, her self-image, the thing she has said she needs to feel like when she walks out there. She turned professional as a teenager and spent the middle of the decade in the part of tennis. Nobody films. Qualifying draws, small events, side courts with a handful of people watching. She played her first Grand Slam main draw match at Wimbledon in 2017 and won it. Then 2018 happened, and the tour found out. That season, she went from outside the top 70 in the world to inside the top 20. She won her first tour title in New Haven. Then she went to Wuhan and won one of the biggest events on the calendar, beating a string of elite players in a single week. That is not a breakthrough. That is a door coming off its hinges. And there is a chapter of her resume that gets skipped and shouldn't. With the Belgian player Elise Mertens, Sabalenka became one of the best doubles players in the world. They won the United States Open in 2019. They won the Australian Open in 2021. She reached world number 1 in doubles. The woman famous for hitting the ball as hard as humanly possible was also elite at the reflex game, the angles, the net. By 2019 and 2020, she was winning 3 titles a season and finishing inside the top 11 2 years running. In 2021, she won Abu Dhabi and Madrid and reached the semifinals of both Wimbledon and the United States Open, career high number 2 in the world. And then, in November of 2019, in the middle of that climb, her father died. He was 43. She was 21. I want to be careful here and honest about what is actually documented. His death has been widely attributed to meningitis after a delayed hospital admission, but the family never issued a detailed public medical account, and this channel is not going to narrate a private hospital timeline as if anyone filmed it. What is documented is everything after. 2 full seasons played without him in the box. Years of press conferences where she is asked about him and answers, on the record, in front of a room of reporters. She has said that the way he raised her, he always told her you have to fight and you have to work hard. She has said there was an entire year where she could not serve. She has said his death changed what tennis meant to her, that it became something bigger, that she wanted to leave a mark, that she wanted to make him proud. She has also said she sometimes goes to church to light a candle for him, and that she is not the kind of person who would ever post about that. So we are not going to invent a scene out of it. We are going to look at what happened to her tennis. Because in January of 2022, the bill came. Sabalenka got the yips. If you don't follow tennis, here is why this is one of the strangest athletic collapses of the last 20 years. The yips are what happens when a movement your body has performed 100,000 times simply stops working. And the harder you concentrate on it, the worse it gets. Golfers get it over 3-foot putts. Baseball infielders get it throwing to first base. It is not a fitness problem. It is barely a technique problem. It is a failure of the wiring between the brain and the arm. And the shot she lost was the serve. The only shot in the sport that is entirely, absolutely yours. Nobody is standing across the net making it harder. It is you, a ball, and a rectangle. It did not start out of nowhere either. She had already led the tour in double faults in 2020, with 166. Then, from the end of the 2021 season and into 2022, it turned into a collapse. 152 double faults in 11 matches, an average of 14 a match. The opening week of 2022 is the part people still talk about. 18 double faults and 1 loss, 21 in the next. Underhand serves, a towel over her face at the change of ends. A player ranked number 2 in the world, physically unable to put a ball in a service box, with a stadium and a television audience watching every attempt. She carried it into Melbourne and still won 3 matches at the Australian Open with a serve that was visibly broken. Across the whole season, the tally came in somewhere between 428 and 440, depending on whose count you use. And she has said, on camera and more than once, that she was ready to quit. Not pause. Not take 6 months off. Quit. Here is what she did instead, and this is the moral center of the whole story. She stayed on television. In the middle of 2022, she hired a biomechanics specialist named Gavin McMillan. Not a hitting coach, not a motivational speaker, a man who studies how human bodies move. His public verdict on her serve was almost insulting in its bluntness. There were so many things wrong from the very beginning. The tossing arm, the hitting arm, the entire chain of motion. She brought in a sports psychologist as well. Her coach, Anton Dubrov, described a player who could hit 25 double faults and still be there in the 3rd set, fighting. And the rebuild did not happen in a private academy behind a locked gate. It happened at tournaments, on practice courts, in the open, ball after ball after ball, with anyone who felt like standing there filming it on a phone. Most athletes hide to fix themselves. She did it on the main stage, in front of the exact crowd that had watched it fall apart. By the second half of that season, it was working. She reached the semifinals of the United States Open, and at the year-end, WTA Finals, she beat the world number 1, the world number 2, and the world number 3 in the same tournament, only the 4th woman in history to do it, and reached the final. And then January arrived. Melbourne, 2023. She did not lose a set all tournament until the final. The final was Aryna Sabalenka, the reigning Wimbledon champion, another player who hits the ball like she is trying to win an argument. Sabalenka lost the first set, 4-6. 1 year earlier, 1 year and a 2-hour flight away, she had been serving underhand and crying into a towel. Now she was a set down in a Grand Slam final, and everything she had ever failed at was sitting in the second set waiting for her. She won it 6-3, then she won the third, 6-4, 51 winners. Breakpoints saved at the start of the second set to turn the match. And it took her 4 championship points to close it out, because of course it did. Because the last thing standing between Aryna Sabalenka and a Grand Slam title was always going to be her own serve. When it finally went in, she dropped the racket, fell flat onto her back on the blue court with both arms out, and stayed there. The hardest part came later, when she had to speak. Not on the winning point. During the speech, talking about her family and her team. Because the man who set the number 2 was not in the box, and never would be. That same season, she reached the final of the United States Open and lost to a 19-year-old American named Coco Gauff in front of a New York crowd that had very loudly decided who it wanted. And on the 11th of September, 2023, she became the world number 1 for the first time in her life. She held it for 8 weeks before Iga Świątek took it back. Then came 2024. January, she defended her Australian Open title, beating Zheng Qinwen in the final. 2 Grand Slam singles titles, age 25. The exact number, inside the exact deadline, that a hockey player named in a car in Minsk. 2 months later, in March, her former partner Konstantin Koltsov, a Belarusian former NHL player, died in Florida. Police ruled it an apparent suicide. That is in the public record, and that is as far as this channel goes with it. Because a human being is not a plot point. What she did next is the part that exists. She released a statement calling it an unthinkable tragedy and saying her heart was broken. Weeks later, in a press conference at Roland Garros, she asked publicly for the speculation to stop. And much later, on the record with Vogue, she spoke about grief, about both losses, and about how she leans on tennis to get through it. And she kept playing. In September of 2024, she won the United States Open, her 3rd major, and her first outside Australia. She won Cincinnati, she won Wuhan. She reached 7 finals. In October, she took the world number 1 ranking back, and she finished the season as year-end number 1 for the first time in her career. I want to resist the easy narration here, and say why out loud. It would be very simple to call this grief transformed into greatness. But she has complicated that reading herself, talking about how much of her early career ran on rage, how unsustainable that was, and how she needed an actual life outside the court before she could feel safe inside it. Her own team has pointed at balance, not fury, as the thing that finally worked. So maybe the honest version is less cinematic. Maybe she survived 2024 rather than conquered it, and the trophies are what happened while she was surviving. And if you want a year that shows you exactly who somebody is, it is 2025. January. Australian Open final, going for 3 in a row in Melbourne. She lost to the American Madison Keys in 3 sets. And the reaction was not a graceful handshake and a wave. It was a racket destroyed beside her chair, in a full stadium, minutes before she had to stand there and applaud somebody else lifting the trophy. June. Roland Garros. Her first French Open final, on the surface that has always been her hardest puzzle. She won the first set. She lost the next 2, to Gauff again. 2 Grand Slam finals in a row, 2 defeats, and a press conference afterwards that generated its own news cycle. And then, weeks later, she said the sentence that explains the entire arc, that after Paris, it was time to sit back, look at those finals, and learn something. Sit back, learn, not burn it down. September, New York. United States Open final against Amanda Anisimova in a stadium of 23,000 people who mostly wanted the American. No screaming at her box, no spiral. 6-3, 7-6 in a tiebreak. An hour and a half of work, and the 100th Grand Slam match win of her career. Her line afterwards, all those tough lessons were worth this one. She finished 2025 as year-end number 1 for the 2nd straight season, with 63 match wins, more than anyone else on tour. 9 finals, and $15,008,000 in prize money. A single-season record for any woman in the history of tennis. 440 double faults to the richest season a woman has ever played. 3 years apart. That is the distance she covered. And she is not finished. January 2026. Melbourne again, another Australian Open final. And this time Rybakina got her back. 6-4, 4-6, 6-4, 4 years after their first final on that court. Sabalenka walked off as the runner-up at the tournament she has owned more than anyone else of her generation. 6 weeks later, in the desert at Indian Wells, she faced Rybakina again in another final, a tournament she had already lost the final of twice. She was 1 point from losing it again. She saved the championship point. She won the title. As of this summer, she is 28 years old, still ranked #1 in the world, with more than 100 consecutive weeks at the top, 4 Grand